Hi, I'm Mara Webster with In Creative Company, and today I'm so thrilled to be talking to the wonderful Justine Lupe all about her Netflix series Nobody Wants This. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about a little bit at the beginning was, obviously this is based on Erin Foster's own experiences with her and her sister. And so your character is loosely based on her sister, Sarah. And I was curious about, the conversations that you had with Erin early on and kind of like understanding that sibling dynamic between the two of them, but also at the same time, the fact that obviously these aren't direct portrayals of them and their relationship. And there's a lot of narrative license taken. So you also have that huge creative freedom to really create this character as your own at the same time.
Yeah. You know, the fact that it's very loosely based on Sarah. She will say herself that it is not her at all, not even an approximation of her. And the truth is when I read it, I didn't know it was Sarah. I read the sides and I immediately like heard a voice that I was like, oh, this is so well written. It's so specific. I know who this woman is. And then I kind of caught on to the fact that the whole pilot was an autobiographical, semi-autobiographical piece. And so I went digging into like who these girls were. And luckily they both have a lot of online presence. They both have a podcast together. And so honestly, that was the well that I drew from. Erin and I really didn't have too many talks about the dynamic. I think that she sensed that I had an intuition for it and that I also I think behind closed doors was just doing a lot of like digging on my own because I find Sarah completely fascinating. I find Erin fascinating. And there's just so much fun to be had and kind of taking on little characteristics that, reminded me of the character that I found in Sarah. But yeah, on set, we didn't have much of a dialogue about it. If anything, she kind of just helped us find the tone a little bit because Kristen and I are both like incredibly like lovey-dovey, open, soft people. And we were kind of always like just steering like just without thinking into like the loving side. And she really wanted us to like veer a little bit more into like the bite between them, because there is this kind of like fantastic biting energy between the two girls, or women. So yeah, I would say that Erin helped steer the tone, but we never had direct dialogue about what I was doing with, referencing Sarah or what their relationship was like or who this woman was. She left that
That's so
me in control of that, which was great.
Yeah, it's so wonderful when it flows that way really naturally and organically. And you're mentioning obviously they have a podcast, and in the show that's part of the storyline and kind of like a huge narrative point for the two sisters. And I love that the first time we see you and Kristen kind of hosting their podcast within this series, that it's just the two of them sitting on the couch very casually, and it feels like there's not a different version of their personas on the podcast to their everyday life. And was that something that you really gleaned early on from the scripts and that you and Kristen found very naturally as well?
Oh yeah, I mean I loved that part of it because I mean like I've watched a lot of like YouTube videos of podcasts or like gone to Instagrams of podcasts that I like, and very often it's not in a studio, so I kind of liked the authenticity of these two sisters sitting on a couch and doing it. I mean, if you look at Erin and Sarah's podcast page or their social media pages, when they post about their podcast, it's literally just like them on a Zoom, split screen, like in sweatpants, no makeup, these like headphones just like leaning back. It could not be like more relaxed and casual. So that's a really fun dynamic to capture. And it was like really fun to get into like the looseness of that relationship, the comfort, the easy rapport between these two people, and the fact that they bring it in public forum. I mean, it's really as a listener of the podcast and also as two people playing it on a television show. I just had a blast with it.
I love that. And obviously part of the dynamic with these two sisters is their ability to just read each other and know things without having to say it. There's a moment where, Morgan's like, "You're spiraling and I know it, even though you're not saying it." And so how did you and Kristen set about just finding what is the unspoken language that they have from this history together, especially because they're so close and they have a real friendship as well as being sisters?
Kristen and I spent a lot of time with each other outside of set. Like, the minute I got the part, she like DM'd me and was like, "Want to go on a hike?" And I was like, "Oh, hi, Kristen Bell. Yeah, I'll go on a hike with you." And we like, we've worked out together. We cold punched together. We went on a like carpool to the table read together. We like really tried to spend as much time like really just hanging out with each other. And that was a lot of fun. And then just it's so well written that we didn't really have to do like, even though those things like it really like established a comfort between us and a rapport between us, the writing is just so it's so clear. Like the way that these two play off of each other and the ease with which they kind of like cross boundaries with each other, know each other, like dip into each other's psyches. It's like all just so on the page. So I think we just had fun playing around with that and trying all these different things with it. And, each of these directors really let us like work our way around the scaffolding of what was already on the page, which was so clear, and like kind of veer off and have fun with like, well, what would this energy be like? What would this like? What if we added a little bit here? Or what if we tried a little bit of that? And yeah, it was really enjoyable doing this with Kristen.
And you were mentioning before that one of the things that Erin really helped you with was just figuring out that biting side of the tone because they're not afraid to pull punches with each other and they know exactly how to kind of push each other's buttons or to say something hurtful in the moment where they want to. And I was curious if that was something where you would go into scenes and kind of play around with how far can they take this before it feels like it's too far in that direction.
Yeah, we definitely played with different levels of it. I think that the scene where it came out the most, where it like got the most intense was clearly episode 8 with that huge blowout between the two sisters. And that one we had a lot of fun and it kind of felt like we couldn't go too far. I mean, there were a lot of like there were a lot of things that we added in there where we're like, oh, is this like, did we just like, because it was a different energy than we'd ever had in the show before. And so we were like kind of just toying around with like exactly what you said, how far can you go? And the truth was, when I watched it back, it felt like A, it was the most fun scene to film. I mean, I just had the best time doing it. And B, I like watched, I think it's this one scene in the whole show that I actually had like a pit in my stomach. Like I felt like a little bit emotionally affected by, where I was like, oh, like, I mean, between Adam and I'm talking just about the scenes with myself, between every other character, there were a lot of moments like that, but I have a hard time seeing things clearly as an actor watching myself. But that scene, we walked away and I felt like kind of like an ugh feeling in my stomach when I watched it. And I'm glad that they let us go as far as they did in a comedy and have fun with that scene in that way.
There's also a lot of great elements in terms of just the physical movement in certain scenes. I think there's that one moment where you're just waving your finger directly in Kristen's face and kind of doing it even more so because you know that it riles her up. And was that something that again just came very naturally to you and Kristen in
Yeah,
finding that comfortability?
totally. That one I just did. Thank God Kristen played with it and didn't just go like, why are you getting so close to my face as an actor, Justine? I like, and then it became like this fun thing. Like once it was introduced into there, I think we did it a few times like that. And there was like there's something about it. It just came out in the moment. But when you think of it, it just goes back to like the most reductive version of these two girls, where it's like this like childlike, like meh, meh, like kind of thing going on that I think like is like a really special essence to catch in these two, that they are like that they have this like map inside of them that all leads back to like their childhood relationship. So to see those little moments where they're like kind of like pettiness, like the childlike pettiness comes out, was really fun. And the fact that she's just incredible at picking up and serving it right back and being in the moment, and like not to be too nerdy, but like in improv terms, like yes anding. So it just made it, yeah, moments like that, we had a lot of fun with that rapport.
And it's such a great point about just the childlike pettiness. And there are so many moments that we see with both of them where they just regress to that space. And
Really?
did you find that a lot of the moments when it's them and their parents, that would kind of bring out that side of them a little bit more because it's that family dynamic that they grew up with?
Totally. And like, I think we can all relate to that. It's like sometimes I'll be like, wow, man, I am like such an adult. I have my shit together. And then I go home for like 3 days and I'm like, whoop, I've regressed. Then I'm back at like 16. Like the moment that I left the house, here we are again. And so I love that side of them. I mean, they're pretty carefree and unfiltered human beings generally, both of them in the world. And I think that's part of what makes it really fun to watch them. But the lengths, the trauma that comes out, like the way that their trauma with their father comes out through them kind of going back to like their childlike selves, even in that like interaction with the parents and the way that they kind of like with the mom and like mom, like it's just so like teenagey. And I could relate to it because, you know, I feel the same way where I'll feel like I'm on a good like track, and then I go home and I'm like, oh no, I'm still actually like a 16-year-old inside. So that's good to know.
Right, but it's such a great point as well that you get to really kind of mine it for the humor, but then also you get to mine it for the more dramatic moments. And I love that scene between you and Kristen where they're like, it was so weird watching our dad say "I love you" because that's not something that he ever said to us. And how did the relationship that they have with their parents and everything that they went through with their separation really shape elements of the character for you?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like one of the things that it really created, the fact that they feel a little bit in some way like they're orphans in a way. Like they have these amazing parents, but they also feel like they were a little bit neglected by like the fact that their father never said I love you, the fact that their mom was kind of like this oversaturated, very like codependent presence that also wasn't like doesn't quite have like the adult kind of maternal like I'm taking care of you vibe. I think these two turn to each other a lot. Like you can see that they like through their whole childhoods turn to each other. And that was a thing that I kind of found the most interesting about it was like the reason that this is so painful for Morgan that that Joanne's moving on and going into this new relationship with this new person is not only because she's jealous and she's, you know, she just had a failed relationship and she's alone, but it's also that she's losing her like soulmate of a sort, like the person that she turned to because their family was a little bit unstable. They found this stability within themselves, and now, oh, my partner is going away and she's falling in love. And how do I deal with that? Not in the most mature way, you know? And so I kind of tried to go back to that quite a bit to try and find like, well, what is the intention behind Morgan being a little bit of a brat or being a little bit of a bully or being a little neggy towards her sister? Well, I think it all comes back to like, this is my like stability source. This is like my love, and she's, you know, moving on.
And going back to what you touched upon before and saying, you know, obviously they're both very unfiltered as well. I love the expressiveness in your performance throughout the whole series. And I think that Morgan's absolutely one of those people that can't conceal her feelings or emotions, even if she's not saying something out loud in the moment. And
Yeah.
was that something that you found very quickly in the character in terms of how you felt she would be based on the dialogue and the way that she speaks very freely as well?
Totally. I mean, I think that I mean, it's not just like a choice that I made about her. I do feel like I felt like her in her spirit, she's kind of carefree and just really reactive. Like she's like a live wire, she's chaos. But beyond that, I also just found that everything around her like is also wild. So like all these reactions that she's having, it's like my father's saying like, oh yeah, you have the same like birthday as the Unabomber, or like my mom is like to Joanne, or say mom is saying like, oh yeah, like you know, you look a lot like Billy Joel. Like these like things are insane, you know, like what my the things that are around me are like crazy, and so it's like a natural reaction. And I think just I as an actor have fun with kind of showing like what the audience might be like. I am an audience member in this interaction between my whole family, and like that's just honestly what my response would be. It's just like what like so those faces, you know, they're not like contrived decisions. It was kind of just me having fun with like what would my reaction be to hearing someone go there, you know.
Right, just getting to be really responsive within all of the scenes as she would be.
Totally. Totally. And I'm like, you know what? If they don't need those facial reactions, they'll just cut away. That's the brilliance of being like the person who's not on cameras. They're like, if they want to use this for comedy, or if they want to use the editor wants to weave this in there, then like cool, they'll get like that, you know, extra element of something of someone listening or something. And if they and if they don't, if it's too much that I'm just responding the way that I would, then they'll just cut around it. I'm not speaking, so it's kind of like the luxury of being the fly on the wall or the person not talking in a scene, you know?
And you were describing before that obviously, you know, there's this real feeling of losing something in terms of her sister going into this relationship because she's now not getting all of that time alone. You know, there's a third corner to that triangle. And I love how that infiltrates into the friendship that develops with Sasha, because at the beginning it's this person that's trying to talk to her and she's like, don't even talk to me. I'm pretending to look at things on the jukebox. I wish you weren't in my space and we didn't have to be together. And then it does develop into this really sweet friendship with all these undercurrents of other elements as well. And so how did you kind of naturally find that dynamic of her guard coming down a little bit more and this actually being someone who understands the same thing that she's going through?
I mean, it's funny because when I first read all the kind of like kind of energy that she's giving to Sasha, I felt like there's something a little like flirty neggy going on here where it's like, oh, come on, like whatever. Like she has fun making him feel like, it's not fun just watching someone put down someone else over and over and over again, unless there's something underneath it where it's like the comedy is like there's something beyond the like teasing or the like rudeness, which is like that I think this person is actually like quite interested in him. Like I think she's like, oh, you're funny, like, or oh, you're like a weirdo and I have fun with that. And so that was like what was there initially. And then the more that they had like this kind of like him like reaching out a hand and helping her and her kind of like giving him feedback on like his loser sibling dumb like and we had so much. It kind of opened up the relationship to something more than just like the teasing. And lucky for me, Tim Simons is like a genius. I think like he's a comedic genius and he's also like a very available fun guy, and I think we have a natural chemistry as friends. And it kind of like unfurled, like it lent itself to the relationship between those two in the show and became something like kind of weird and complex that actually ended up working when you watch it.
I've also heard you describe that you kind of feel like Morgan's someone who doesn't really have male friends in her life.
Oh
And
yeah.
then there's the description of like Sasha, where he's basically saying, I've only ever had one female friend and then I married her and she's now my wife. And so he's kind of in that same space on the opposite side of the spectrum. And so how much do you feel like their inability to necessarily know the parameters or know how to specifically relate to each other creates a lot of that questionable dynamic that ends up existing?
Totally. I mean, I think for one thing, Morgan is someone who's just always kind of put herself in a box or has been put in boxes by men as like someone who is like only seen in a sexual way, or there's only been like a romantic kind of like intent behind her relationships with men. So I think there's that like given circumstance. And then on top of that, I think it's just a really interesting thing that happens between men and women who have boundaries. Like he is in a marriage and he has a child, and when you're an adult, you have to establish, you have these new friendships that come along, and they can be a little bit like, well, what is this? I know I'm attracted to you. I don't know if it's like a sexual attraction or a romantic attraction or a friendship attraction or a magnetism, like, oh, I just find you magnetic. And it is kind of an interesting thing. Like, well, what is this and what are the rules of this? Like we all have it. I've had it in my life, like where I run into someone where I'm like, ooh, you're sparkly. And also like it's not that. It's not that, but like what are the boundaries? Like is it okay that I text you in like at night? Like is it okay that we like have these phone calls? Is it okay that we hang out because I'm a woman and you're a man? Like I find it I know a lot of people who have been in those circumstances, and I've been in them in myself, and so it was kind of an interesting thing to see that on screen. Well, what is this and how do we navigate it? And then on top of that, Morgan's history of just being someone who purely sees men as prospects, romantic prospects, or as men as like people as an entity that sees her purely as like a sexual object or as like a romantic partner, and doesn't see like platonic relationships as like a viable option for herself. I just thought those two kind of like, you know, the two contexts of those two situations was really interesting, and it created like a really weird dynamic that I think both Tim and I were also kind of confused by and had fun with.
And there is a moment where they do have a conversation about, is it weird that we're having these conversations? And so there is an awareness on both sides. And, even just the aspect that she calls him and she knows immediately, are you calling me from the bathroom because your wife doesn't know we're talking? And the fact that she doesn't tell her sister as well says so much about it from her side. How much kind of like self-awareness or self-reflection did you want her to have versus needing to kind of be in denial a little bit about the idea that maybe there is something a little bit more than a friendship?
I mean, I think that Morgan's a straight shooter. So like she's just like, what is going on here? Like this is weird. Let's admit that it's weird. Like why is it weird? I don't know, but it's weird. Like it is weird that you're hiding in a bathroom. It is weird that we're like texting. Like just admit that it's weird. So I think she actually has quite a bit of self-awareness and that she's kind of like, let's call this out. Like what is this? Can we like talk about it? And there's just like a lot of like, no, it's not. It's not. It's not, you know. So she's I see her as kind of the voice of reason and having some like real self-awareness about it. And even the fact that she has like a sex dream about him and like immediately confronts Joanne. I don't think she's like delusional about what's going on. I think she's just trying to call it like it is and then figure out what that means. Do you know?
Yeah, like it's hard to call it as it is if you don't know what it is.
Totally. Yeah. But she's trying.
Yeah. One of the scenes that I love as well in terms of like how she shows up for her sister is the moment where her sister's at Noah's basketball game and kind of calls her for reinforcement, like these girls don't want to be friends with me. And you know, Morgan's the one to walk in and be like, these mean popular girls are not going to out mean popular us. Like we are that, and we're going to show them, and kind of rolling up with the bottle of tequila. And so I just wanted to ask about kind of going into a scene like that where she knows that she's on enemy territory, but it doesn't matter because she needs to try and do this for her sister.
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that's most you know, on Succession I felt this way with Willa as well. There's something really fun about playing someone who really just does not give a fuck. Like she just doesn't care. She's just like, you know, whatever. Like this is gonna be fine. Like whatever. Like you're gonna be mean, fine. Let's go in and we'll play. There's something so fun about that. I had a lot of fun with that with Willa in this like group of like people who are like vipers being really, really tough on each other. And that she kind of like floats through the whole situation mildly untouched by the whole family. And I felt like that same kind of essence exists in Morgan. And boy, is that like a fun thing to play, like the person who can just like come in there and like, you know, take the bull by its horns. But the thing that was also really fun about it is she keeps on saying, you know, she says like, oh, we're the mean popular girls. We're going to out mean popular them. But the whole spirit of it is, come on girls, like let's have fun, let's fucking make a game out of this, let's rage, like let's like she invites them in as her way of kind of winning over the situation. So that also I kind of loved. It wasn't like she came in there and she like put them all down and like spanked them back into like being, you know, into submission. She invited them in and she was like, we can have fun together. And I kind of thought that was like a sweet twist on the mean popular girl thing. So that was a really fun scene to shoot.
It wasn't. It kind of like is almost like a great training ground for when they go into the bat mitzvah in that final episode, and it's not your party anymore. It's our party now that we're here. And so what was the dynamic that you wanted to create for Morgan? Because even just seeing her on the dance floor, it doesn't matter if anybody is on the same page at that party. It's like she's there to have fun in her own way.
Totally. I mean, I was in love with Morgan. I found her so fun. The moment that I read her, I was like, I'm in love. I like think she's so rich. And so that like the bat mitzvah, it felt like a celebration of that for me. Like I was like, let's celebrate that, like my feelings about Morgan. Let's like give her a place to like have fun by herself. I hate it's so gross like referring to her as like someone else, but it's just the truth. I was like, this character's so great. Let's party. Like and so it was just so fun to give her that space to like be the person that, you know, so much throughout the show she's kind of like she is a bit of the she's like, you know, the antagonist of sorts, you know. She's like running up against their and in this moment she's just celebrating the fact that she's obsessed with her sister and she knows how to have a good time and she knows how to be carefree and like and I just had so much fun playing that side of Morgan, you know, the side that's like game, which is a huge part of who she is, you know.
Yeah, I love it. She's such a great character, and she's exactly the type of person you would want in your corner as well for a situation like that. So I loved watching your performance in the show, and thank you so much, Justine. Really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. It means a lot. And thanks for having me.